Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right, hey, welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Today, we're going to be continuing our series called Monetary Moments. And today, we're going to be talking about what could arguably be one of the most important parts of your life when it comes to your financial planning.
That's right. We're going to be talking about when you officially become able to wear New Balance white shoes as a dad.
So that was like 10 years ago for you?
I love those things. Rock those all the time.
My dad always, he says, you kids, you have to keep me off of the white New Balance train. He's like, if I go somewhere rogue with my wardrobe, pull me back.
Let him know.
Pull me back. So I give him a hard time once in a while, but he has yet to fall into the white New Balance.
Now, I never got that trend because as a dad, keeping shoes white would be an impossible task.
Yeah, you got to mow and everything.
There's no way. I don't think I'm
no.
ever going to wear white shoes like that.
But for real, today we're going to be talking about what you need to know about money in your 40s and your 50s.
Yes.
So therefore, at that point, all the good years are behind you. Wait, Josh, you are right on the cusp.
Knocking on the door of 40.
You're on the cusp. So I mean, actually, you're in the prime of your life.
Yes.
This is the prime of your life, and we've got some things to think about as it relates to this time in your life. So Josh, go ahead and get us started with kind of what a lot of people have a lot of emphasis in and a lot of effort has gone into getting them this far in their life.
Yeah. So if you remember, we started with the 20s and 30s, and we were working up through this year, entry into your early part of your career.
Correct.
That's a lot to say together.
Entry, yeah.
Yes.
So it was, yeah. This was getting your career started.
Entry-level career, you're getting started. You're probably in maybe a job that's maybe not your ideal spot, but you're in the career or the path you want to be on. 40s and 50s, you probably have done well. You may have switched companies, but you're probably in the career you like. You probably have advanced a little bit. Chances are these are the 40s through the 50s. So this would be 40 to 59. That's really, a good gap, two decades. But that's probably your, like you mentioned, highest earning years of your career during that time frame because you're going to get promotions, you're going to advance, you're going to have experience, which is key.
Yep, but you're not on the way out where you don't get those big raises and opportunities. Right. So this is key earning time.
Ideal. That advancement brings a lot of things. It brings opportunities. It also brings some more incentives and motivation in forms of, like you said, raises or maybe other perks available for you. The other thing along with that, when it comes to your job, is during this time frame, some of those additional benefits are actually more valuable to you.
Right.
If you think about it, as a 20-year-old, you could probably find relatively cheap insurance comparatively as a 20-year-old. As a 50-year-old, your insurance on your own is going to be pretty expensive, but if a company plan is offered to you, that's a nice benefit.
Absolutely.
It's going to save you quite a bit of money. Same is true with, like a lot of companies offer life insurance. And we're going to talk about life insurance in a little bit. But if you're offered it there, it's usually cheaper than you can go out and get elsewhere. Some of them may even include it as part of your compensation and say, 1 times your salary or whatever. Well, those are benefits that you are more valuable the older you get because the cost for you to go out and get it on your own, it increases with time. So those are all things when it comes to your job or your career to think about as you're in your 40s and 50s.
So we kind of touched on it, but yes, this is the time of your life where you probably have the most money coming in than you've ever known before. And probably the most you ever will, as you go into retirement, your lifestyle may change, your income needs may change, whatever that looks like. This is probably peak income and also probably peak spending. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But the key here is with that highest income that you're probably ever going to have in your life during this period, it's crucially important to watch and control your spending. Not just watch, actually control it. Yeah. But just watching it, you can watch it go up.
Watch it go up. Look
at that. But control it because the more that you control your spending, so the money going out, the less actual income you're going to have to replace by dipping into your nest egg in retirement. That's called, you're avoiding that lifestyle creep, right? So we talked about it before, but maybe you'll be getting raises, getting promotions, getting new jobs. You're earning more money throughout this period of your life, probably in decent-sized chunks at this point. When you get these raises, when you get whatever that may be, try not to let your monthly spending increase by that amount. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say, hey, I had a really good promotion. I got a 10% raise. I'm doing great. Wow, I can all of a sudden get a new car and a new, bigger house, and I can start eating organic. Nope,
don't do that.
Don't do that. What we like to recommend, and I'm going to ask you to elaborate on it because this is your jam, Josh.
I love it.
The 50-50 rule. We're going to say 50-50 rule. So go a little bit on a tangent for 50-50 rule.
Yeah, so what you do is you go to your nearest high school sporting event. They'll be handing out tickets, and they'll say, this is a 50-50 raffle. So you
Buy
take
'em
all
all.
your raise. No, I'm just kidding. Do not do that. The 50-50 rule for what we're talking about is you take, let's say you get a 4% raise. We're going to use that because it's easy for me to do math that way.
Ooh,
4% raise. The 50-50 rule says you take half of that raise, so 2%.
Yep.
You add it to your monthly spending because things go up in cost. You get to reward yourself and have some additional spending in your budget. The other half, the other 50%, goes into your savings. So the 50-50 rule just says half of every raise goes to savings.
Yep.
The other half goes to your budget and your spending. And that does, like Austin mentioned, slows down the increase of your spending. And the reason why that matters is, one, it gives you more money to save because you're not eating it all up in your budget.
Course.
But two, it keeps your spending down. So when you go into retirement, your starting withdrawal needs are lower because I'm needing to live on less.
Right.
And that's huge. That has one of the biggest impacts on your success of retirement is how much am I going to spend once I stop working.
We're going to call this the double-edged sword of goodness.
Sure.
Because you get to increase your investing or your saving. That's edge number one. It's really good. And you're cutting your spending.
Yep.
You're doing two good things by a good thing that you were given.
That's
so
right.
Double-edged sword of goodness right
And
there.
honestly, this 50-50 rule applies to everybody. In your 20s and 30s, you're going to get raises. If you can do this during that whole time frame, you'll really slow down your need for spending and really impact your overall success. So this isn't just a 40s and 50s things, but it becomes a bigger deal in your 40s and 50s as those raises are on a higher percentage, right?
Yeah.
5% raise on $10,000 is a little different than a 5% raise on $100,000.
Absolutely.
So, there's two different dollar amounts we're talking about, which really matter from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, that's why these years are so important because the percentages may be even closer to the same when you were in your 20s and your 30s. However, the dollar impact is much larger, and that's why it's good to just really crimp down on those things. I think it's probably also worth pointing out that your spending is going to look a lot different in your 40s and your 50s than it did in your 20s and your 30s. So your life probably looks a lot different. In your 20s and 30s, maybe you were single and renting and driving that beater car from college and whatever all these things are, eating ramen. Who knows what you were doing? Maybe in your 40s and your 50s, you've got some kids, which, as you know, aren't free.
They're not cheap.
They're not cheap. So you've got kids, and that's a big time frame that we're talking about here, too, 40s and 50s. But you could be having older kids, and I remember especially, as boys, so my brother and I were in the house same time as teenagers, they will eat you out of house and home.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something to think about. But there's just your budget looks a lot different. Your housing budget looks a lot different. Your car budget looks a lot different. Your everything budget looks a lot different. So keep that in mind. It's not going to look the same. It's not supposed to look the same.
And that's talking about that spending. Here's a couple things to keep in mind. So we talk about the kids. They're probably going to be one of your largest expenses during your 40s and 50s.
And you can't get rid of them at this point. You're
if
stuck.
you have kids, let's say you had a kid at 22, right? They're not turning 18 at 22 years old. They're going to be 40 when they turn 18, right? And so we're talking about this right here. They're going to college at the beginning part of this stage. If you're 30 when you have a kid, you'll be 48 by the time they're heading to college. And so that's why this window of time is a pretty big deal when it comes to spending for your kids. Paying for college, maybe in the 40s you're saving for college, maybe in the 50s is when you're spending it out, depending on, again, when you have kids. But throughout that time frame, college costs are expensive.
And they're going up, by the way, throughout the whole thing.
It is. It is getting expensive. Along with that, a midlife crisis, So 40s and 50s are realistically a midlife, if you look at life expectancy, sometime in there. And, some people during the midlife crisis time period make purchases. And you just got to be careful that those do not impact your long-term goals.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with splurging. There's nothing wrong with doing a once-in-a-lifetime thing if that fits within your plan. So, I've known people that have said, you know what, that's about when our kids are at a certain age where we would like to do this big family vacation.
Yep.
And it's going to cost us some more money than we normally do, but this is something I want to plan for and do. But at that point, they'll be old enough to all enjoy it.
Correct.
Right? And so those are the things you just got to keep in mind and plan for, because your spending will look different. You're not want to take that lifetime trip when you have a 2-year-old, because one, they're not going to enjoy it, and you probably won't enjoy it as much either.
Well, this isn't probably a good time to, though your credit may be excellent, spend $250,000 on a Lamborghini.
Yes. Yeah.
It may put you back in your financial plan. So, ear piercings, those are affordable. You can have those as midlife crisis. Tattoos, yeah, those are affordable.
Henna ink, and then it's not even as a temporary one.
It's like $50 midlife crisis. I just wanted to try it out.
Maybe it's not even a midlife crisis, but this is also the point where people who are looking for a vacation home, this is about the time frame where you start to see those things show up in retirement planning. Is, okay, when I'm this age, I'm hoping to be able to get a vacation home or do those type of things. So all those things need to be planned for and accounted for when you're looking at it.
So we hit on it last episode. We were talking about our younger years, 20s and 30s. Debt looks a little bit different as well in your 40s and 50s. So hopefully, with your higher income that you've had since you've grown up a little bit out of those in 20s and 30s and you're in your 40s and 50s, your debt burden or your debt level is reduced or hopefully maybe even eliminated. Yep. But it's not uncommon for, we would say this is probably an okay time to, if you have a mortgage, you're not behind the curve, right? A fixed rate mortgage, we would say. Pretty normal, but other things, specifically credit card debt, hopefully you've got paid off. Student loans, hopefully you've got paid off. Any car loans, those are things trying to not have them at this point is probably our advice.
And I would say the student loans is probably the biggest one, because it usually carries into the late 30s, early 40s for a lot of people, depending on what kind of education you got. But this is the time frame where you're knocking some of those debts that you've been kind of paying on throughout your 20s and 30s, but now you have some extra income and you're going to get rid of those just in time to get, student loan debt for your kids or whatever. But in general,
just trade one for the other.
The debt is a good spot. This is a time frame to really focus in on it. And we'll talk in a minute about some of that extra cash flow, what you do with it. But, mortgages, depending again when you bought your house, but we're talking about 2 decades. So you're knocking down that mortgage, and you could be paying it off near the end of this time frame or somewhere during that. If you get the 15-year mortgage, again, you're probably seeing that paid down. So just being aware of those debt burdens. And then, again, if you get extra cash flow when things get paid off, not to just let that be absorbed into your budget, but being mindful of what you want to do with that extra money along the way.
Next up is insurance. So you kind of hit on this earlier that we're going to be talking about it, but this is a good time in your life to be reviewing your life and disability insurance. We talked about it last episode that you should be getting it, but your needs probably look a lot different as your income and lifestyle has increased at this point. Also, got to remember, inflation's real, especially now, right?
Yes.
Costs are going to continue to go up as you age, so you need to be prepared for that. But your financial situation, when you look at specifically your assets and your liabilities, hopefully your liabilities are less and your assets are more, and you're probably in a lot better financial situation were something to happen to you, whether that be, through untimely death or through disability, that your needs may be a little bit lower than they were when you were younger, or that you need to hold those shorter. There's a shorter time period that you'll need those benefits. And there are ways that we talked about in our life insurance episode where you can kind of ladder out some of those policies to get needs met and stuff like that. But this is just a good time to revisit that.
Yeah. And along with that, we talked about umbrella insurance. We've talked about that in a prior episode.
Should be pretty cheap to insure. Umbrellas are pretty affordable by themselves.
You need one, so you got to have one. Umbrella insurance, though, covers everything outside of your car insurance or home insurance. And that's important, again, as your asset level grows, to protect those assets you worked hard for. So an umbrella insurance would be another policy in your 40s and 50s you might want to consider adding to your portfolio. Last of this grouping, things to consider is estate planning. So hopefully you set up a will or something simple in your 20s and 30s. And again, we talked about that, is making sure that if something were to happen to you, your wishes are set up.
Yep.
40s and 50s, your wishes may change. Your kids may be older.
You may have kids now.
You may have kids, may not have them before. Yeah. There's different situations that you're going to want to make sure that your estate plan matches where you're at. Maybe your assets in your mid 40s, late 50s, as you're heading into that time period, a trust may be worthwhile, because at that point you can help dictate what happens post your passing with that money. It can be spread out and gifted in certain ways. And so an estate plan is something worth looking at in your 40s and 50s. Hopefully you already have something in place, but it may be updated or tweaked as it goes.
On that morbid note, Josh, I have a dad joke of the week for you. And it's kind of funny.
Just kind of funny.
It's kind of funny. How many eye doctors does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know.
Is it 1 or 2?
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2?
I'll love it.
So there you go. All right. Next up in our discussion points about what to do in your 40s and 50s is investing. We like investing. We talk about it week in and week out. It's kind of our passion in this business. So I'm going to start with some statistics, okay?
Yes, we love stats.
So this is from a survey from Fidelity, one of the world's largest custodians. So they have a lot of data, and this is talking about 401ks. So the average balance in your 40s in a 401k plan is $103,000. The average balance in your 50s is $174,000.
Okay.
And the average contribution rate in your 40s is 8.5% and 10.1% in your 50s. So looking at those numbers, it really depends on your income and your goals, whether those are good or bad. But as we generally think about, now this is only the 401k piece of the contribution rate, but 8.5%, 10.1%, not real great numbers, pretty low. And we think that we would advise people to strive for more than that. And depending on your salary level, those balance numbers seem a bit low.
So to talk about that. So we've talked in the past, a way of judging where you're at is looking at your salary.
Yep.
Right? Because if you're a doctor and earn $1 million a year, your savings need to match what your spending is. You may have a higher life expenses.
Right.
If you're making $50,000 a year, your savings and your income is going to be a little different.
That's why percentages.
What's a good way of tracking
that's why percentages and multiples mean so much more in this business. So we ended the last episode talking about what you want by 39, right? 20s and 30s. 39, the goal was 3 times your salary before you turn 40 or when you turn 40 or whatever.
And that's 3 times your salary in investment accounts for retirement.
Now, it's not just
net worth.
Correct.
Right.
All that is investment accounts that you will not touch until retirement.
Right. So you don't say, hey, well, my house is worth X. Nope,
does not count.
That's not what it is.
So at a high level, big round numbers because we like them, say that when you turn 40, you're 39 and a half, turning 40 or whatever, you make $50,000 a year in income. Your 3 times your salary, would say, in your retirement account umbrella, which would be maybe Roth IRA, could be your 401k, whatever that may be, rollover IRA from a previous employer, all of these added up that you cannot and should not touch until retirement should be $150,000, right?
Makes sense. 3 times.
So by 50, so 10 more years, so when you turn 50, so this is really the end of your 40s here, that should be more than double in dollars, but it should be 6 times your salary at 50.
Yeah.
So
my salary increases.
Your salary is going to increase, but suppose your salary didn't increase, then it'd be $300,000, right? 6 times your 50-year-old salary, and then by the time you turn 60, another decade down the road, and you're inching up towards retirement, which we're going to have a special episode about your 60s because that's the most important retirement choice, period. But by the time you turn 60, 8 times your salary, so that'd be another $100,000 on that $50,000. So if you make $50,000. You're looking at $700,000 at that point. Is that right? Did I say that right? 150, 300. Oh, that would only be $400,000.
That sounds better.
Now my math was a little off on that. So anyway, it's a multiple thing, right? As you mentioned before, depending on your occupation, depending on your income level, that really determines your budget. And that's that budget that you're trying to continue through to retirement, right?
And then the way these numbers work is, right, you say, well, what's 8 times? And again, the end spot is to get about 10 times your salary is the goal at the end. And the reason why that works is the assumptions that Fidelity is using in these calculations are that you're going to spend a little less in retirement. On average, is about 70-80% is what they're using. And they're saying, okay, if you can get a balance of this, your withdrawal rate could sustainably match for the next 30 to 40 years that reduced amount. And that's, again, why savings matters, because if you're going to spend less, you better be living on less so it's not a weird adjustment in retirement.
Yes. So those are kind of some goals, high-level goals. And again, look at it with percentages and multiples so that you can, no matter who you're talking about, no matter how much money you make, it's all easy to think about and compare.
And you said the average is 8.5% for 40-year-olds and 10% for 50-year-olds.
Right.
What do we think it should be like?
Yeah, so we would aim to be working towards, so really through your 20s and your 30s, into your 40s and your 50s, you're probably not going to be able to do the very beginning, but work towards setting aside for retirement 20 to 25% of your gross income. Now, caveat being,
Yes.
that includes your contributions and your employer contributions.
Total savings going
Total
into your
savings going into all of your accounts.
25%.
So that can
20
be
to 25%.
Roth IRAs, whatever. That can be your 401k or 403b or whatever that may be, including employer contributions. 20 to 25% is what you should work towards. And that's why that 50-50 rule is so important, because when you're just starting out, we advised last episode, do whatever it takes to get your employer match.
Get the minimum.
Pay off some debt, do those kind of things, then increase it from there. But as you're doing that with that 50-50 rule, boom, you're increasing. You're starting with X percent, and then you get a couple more percent every year, a couple more percent.
Let's say you just get a 2% raise every year. That's, inflation if we look backwards, over the last 10, 15 years has been about 2%.
Right.
Roughly. So let's just say you kept up with inflation. So every year you did 1% to your budget, 1% to your savings.
Yep.
From your 20s to 30s, that was 10%.
Yeah.
30s to 40s, now you're at 20% savings. 40s to 50s, now you're at... So again, you can see how just doing that slowly over time,
and you're
gets
not
you where
going
you need
to,
be.
and your lifestyle is going to be great. You're going to be getting a little bit more money in your pocket every year.
Yep.
But the most important thing is that you're not letting all of it go to
Right.
your budget, because you're then throwing it into your investments, which is how you can easily get to 20-25%. So that's awesome. And that's the way we would say that. So let's kind of talk about priorities.
Yes.
And we talked about this a little bit in our account types episode a while back, and we can link that in the show notes below. But let's talk about like how you would waterfall this money to get to that 20-25%. So first of all, didn't change from last episode. Do what it takes to get your whatever that percent match at your company retirement plan is.
100% return.
No brainer, you're going to do that.
Free money.
So that's first and foremost, and you should do that no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter what. So, number 2, then after that, go straight to open up a Roth IRA. You can do that through a variety of mediums. You can do it online with, electronic robo-advisors, whatever, and they're very affordable. You can work with an advisor, and that's often a great option, especially as you're at this point in your life and you have some assets to work with. They can really help you put together your financial plan through that. But max out that Roth IRA, and as of 2021, that limit is, Josh?
$6,000.
Or?
Once you turn 50, then it's an extra $1,000.
Exactly. So max that out. That is by Social Security number. You get that much. So you and your spouse or whatever can both do that. So that's next bucket. So once you get maxing that out, then you go back and add to your 401k more up until the IRS maximum, which is what, $19,500.
Yep. And then
dollars.
Once you get past 50 again, you get an extra $6,000 in there. So you can put up to almost $25,500 there. So you get a good chunk of money in both of those spots.
And
those are all tax deferred or tax-free growth
Right.
once they're in those two buckets.
Right. So you get two different angles of tax sheltering, I guess, is the way you can look at it.
Maybe your 401k offers a Roth IRA,
Correct.
a Roth 401k. That's an option too.
Yeah, so in your 401k or 403b or whatever that is, if it's not the Roth option, that's pre-tax money. So you're really saving on today's taxes, which at this point in your life is really good because
Higher tax
bracket. But then that Roth IRA, if your income allows it, an income limit, Josh, is
About 180,000, give or take.
So if your income level allows it at this point, that is, you're putting it in post-tax and it grows tax-free. So that's another great tool to have. And that's why we like talking about different buckets and having different options there. So once you max out your 401k, so after you're maxed out your Roth, you go back, you max out your 401k, you can then do whatever you want, right? Nope. Got goals.
Yep.
These goals are then going to be probably to open up a taxable account is going to be your next option and ultimately the most flexible option. So any more of your assets that you want to invest at that point, you can do it in a taxable account, and yeah, it's taxable, but you can do whatever you want whenever you want with it, which is a super great thing. But another nugget I want you to not forget about is you can really be socking away money into your HSA during this point.
Yep.
If you don't need your HSAs have great tools all around.
That's a health savings account.
Yes. If you don't need to use that to fund your healthcare needs as you're going along, you can save and invest that money and use it for what's likely to be probably pretty high healthcare cost in retirement. Healthcare need cost, not healthcare plan cost.
That is an account that's triple tax savings.
Triple, I love
You
it.
get tax deduction on
Yep.
your contributions. Grows tax-free while it's invested, and if you use it for the right expenses, healthcare expenses, then it's tax-free on the distribution. So
Yeah.
it's a great asset to have. You can put about $7,200, I think, in a year.
7,000, I think, for a family at this point.
Yeah, something right around there. And they allow you to put that in per year. And again, you get a deduction on those contributions, and it grows tax-free. I will say, we're talking about, this is retirement savings. So like a taxable account, depending on what your goals are, you may open one up before you max out your 401k if you have shorter term goals. Yep. It's all about what your goals are and what the best account structure is for that. But you're right. That 401k, because it's pre-tax, it's a great long-term savings vehicle and a great spot. And allows for automatically adding to it, which we know habits matter. And so if you can just have it automatically taken out of your paycheck, it's a great way of automating that savings.
So, Josh, something you're very passionate about is making financial plans.
Yes.
And looking at financial plans, analyzing them, and tweaking them, right? So at this point in your life, what should you be considering in terms of your asset allocation?
Yeah, as you're in your 40s and 50s, so 40 to 59, like you talked about, Austin, what you're doing is you're starting to prepare for that next transition, that phase in life where you go from your working career into retirement. And we're going to spend a lot of time in our next episode talking about that retirement phase. But in your 40s and 50s, you're preparing for that, right? You want to get in the right mindset and get in the right asset allocation. So the asset allocation is as you are investing and growing, you want to be as aggressive as you can tolerate to get that growth while you're working. But as you're getting closer to that retirement phase, it may be prudent to reevaluate that risk. Is it still worth those volatility of the short term for my goals? In other words, if I'm entering my late 50s and I'm hoping to retire in my 60s, maybe I open up a taxable account and be a little less aggressive, and that becomes my first bucket I get into. There's a whole thing about sequence of return risk and having bad returns early in retirement that has a drastic impact on your success.
Right.
And so if I can eliminate that risk by having some very conservative money in a bucket, it's helpful. And so there's the things you can start thinking about, especially mid to late 50s, where you're saying, okay, what can I do to start preparing for the next phase? And then we'll talk about all that in the 60s about as you transition what that looks like. The other thing that you're doing through this time frame when you're looking at the planning is really fine-tune those goals. Because in your 20s, you may say, I'd want to retire. In my 60s, I want to do this, I want to do that. Well, life has happened.
Now you're there.
20, and now you're in your 40s and 50s to say, okay,
this is pretty close.
Let's actually really sit down and think through those goals. What realistically will make me happy about retirement? What are the things that will make me feel fulfilled and give me that sense of purpose when I'm making that transition? And so 40s and 50s is the best time to start thinking about that. You can start dreaming for it. Gives you something to, that light at the end of the tunnel as you've been working hard to say, okay, I can see it. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm going to work every day to get to that point, to get to that goal. So that's a great time to do it. I love having meetings with people in their 40s and 50s as they're starting to have those more serious retirement discussions. We talk retirement with 20-year-olds, but it's kind of pointing them in the right direction. But now it's actually, you can see it. You can get more tangible about what are some of those actual things you want to do and accomplish.
Like open a taco truck.
And drive around.
I just love tacos, Josh. I eat them all the time.
That's right.
It's my favorite food.
Now, we will say, you see job transitions in the 40s and 50s as well. That doesn't mean it's going to set you back. There may be a thing where you say, you know what? I'm passionate about this. Now I'm at a point in my life where I can make those adjustments. That's great. That's part of that freedom thing, is making those changes to say, you know what? I've worked in X career and I learned a lot of experience. But you know what? I really enjoy doing this. Taco trucks. Whatever it is. I don't even care. Maybe you like tacos. But I'm at a point where I can make that transition. Right. Now, again, you want to make sure you're clear on those goals and where they go, but you see a lot of that in the 40s and 50s of people making
and
transitions.
That's where if you sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about financial planning wise, they can look at your picture when you're in career one and say, okay, here's where you're at. Yeah, we can make this work, and here's what you need to do going forward. And then you have some great options at that point, because it's not the end. Yep. It could be the beginning of something totally fun and totally new. And okay, something we didn't really talk about is a lot of people continue working far beyond these years.
Yeah. And we'll talk about in the 60s and 70s of what that looks like.
So this is just kind of standard ages of when these things happen. But a lot of people do things before, a lot of people do things after. So it really depends on your situation.
It really comes to, everybody is always asking. One of the most often questions I get is, how do I compare? Am I on track? Am I like everybody else, right? And that's where those salary, Well, are you in your 40s? Okay, let's try to shoot for 6 times your salary by the time you get to 50. Oh, you're in your 50s? Let's shoot for 8 times your salary when you get to 60. Those are things that are tangible. You can say, okay, here's the average. Here's what you're trying to do. Where are you at? Because if someone comes and says, hey, I earn X amount of dollars and I have X amount saved, how do I compare? Well, it's a hard comparison because, what are your goals? Are they different than the next person? But You can use those percentages and use those kind of salary goals as a way of at least giving you a benchmark to shoot for.
2 things to wrap us up here. Yes. Number 1, it's still not too late. And it won't be too late until December 31st. But you can still join our second annual Invested Dads second half stock draft.
And we need to get a shorter name.
We got to get a shorter name than that. But check out our episode a few ago where we actually put our picks out and how to enter your lineup for that and how you can be a part of that. Number 2, as always, check out our free gift to you. It's a brief list of 8 principles of timeless investing. These are 8 overarching investment themes meant to keep you on track to meet your long-term goals. These are some great things we've talked about today, and these are surely part of that list. Josh, how can people help us grow this podcast?
Yeah, make sure you subscribe. That way you can get our new episode every Thursday. And then also leave us a review at Apple Podcasts. It's great for us. It helps more people find us. If you have any questions, thoughts, if you're going through your 40s and 50s and wanted more details on something, shoot us an email at hello@theinvesteddads.com. We'd love to interact with you and help you out. And then also, if you know somebody going through that time period, think this would be helpful, share this episode with them.
Well, until next week, where we talk about your 60s. Have a great week.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.